And we are live.
Ep.008, the evolution of speed. Easily my favorite topic is speed. I have an obsession with speed. I've dedicated most of my career to teaching speed, hence Functional Speed Academy. That's my company. And today we're going to talk about its origins. You know, speed is it's an exciting topic. As a kid, I remember watching the Olympics, watching Michael Johnson, and later on watching Usain Bolt, you know, watching Adrian Peterson, Michael Jordan, and just seeing all these athletes and just being fascinated by speed. So it's no secret that I love speed, and more than likely, if you're a parent, you love speed, and if you're an athlete, you love speed. I think everybody loves speed, and if you don't love speed, you might want to like check yourself a little bit, because speed is pretty cool.
Speed is life.
Speed is life, right? Speed is life. One of the things though that I do want to go over today is origins of speed. Like, where do things come from? If you've seen speed, if you're an athlete, obviously I would hope you're doing some form of speed training. And if you're an ex-athlete, you've done speed training. And a lot of the things I feel that we do are things that we've always done. So we kind of just keep doing it.
Yeah.
So one thing that I'm going to do is I want to give you guys like a simple version, like the short version. I'll give you guys like the 3-minute version of the evolution of speed. And then I'm going to break it down by decades, 60s, 70s, 80s, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So that way you guys understand where things originated from. The funny thing about that you guys might find is that when I go over a concept, like let's say from the 70s, from the 80s, you might go, oh my God, my baseball coach actually makes us do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the funny part about it is that the coach will say something along the lines of, well, this is what I did when I was playing sports and I was really fast. So I'm just going to give you guys that same blueprint.
Yeah.
And there's not to say that coach is wrong.
Yeah.
But I want to break it down. I really want to dissect it. As much as I love speed, if you ever view my social media, you might quickly find out like I don't talk about speed a whole lot. My reason is because, believe it or not, it's actually because of my colleagues. If my colleagues and people if you're in the performance space, you're a trainer, a strength coach, anything in the performance space, you say something, people are like crucifying you right away. Like, oh, explain this. Oh, he's wrong. Well, how about this situation? So
Yeah.
I feel the energy of defending my philosophies is almost unnecessary.
Yeah.
What I do care about, the opinions that I do care about, not the online people, are my athletes. If my athletes are getting good results and my athletes are not getting injured doing it.
Yeah.
Those two things, we want performance improvements and we want to make sure that they're staying on the field, staying on the court, not getting injured, then I'm going to live by that. So, but here's the short version. 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional, 3-dimensional, 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional. There you go. 2, 3, 4. Apparently I don't know how to count.
We went the same way.
Yeah. I'm like 2, 2, 1, 7. Got it. Initially, short version. In the beginning, everything was viewed as a 2-dimensional skill early on.
Yeah.
So in the 60s, 70s, there wasn't a whole lot of structure. So everything was like, okay, just run in a straight line.
Yeah.
And you'll get fast.
Yeah.
That was probably for, a couple decades. And then maybe in the 90s, 2000s, they said, okay, 3-dimensional speed, we actually got to be fast in every single direction.
Yeah.
I first became exposed to the idea of 3-dimensional speed by a performance coach named Lee Taff, AKA the Godfather of Speed.
Yeah.
Look him up. He's pretty awesome. And I was like, oh my God, there's lateral speed, there's change of direction, there's acceleration, there's re-acceleration. And I started getting exposed to that in, I would say, early 2010s. And then around 2017, 18, I started treating speed as a 4-dimensional skill, meaning that athletes have to be fast in every direction, but they have to be able to do it in real time.
Yeah. I remember that was one of the things you were talking about early on, because I was asked a vague question. Oh, how do I get, more speed? And you're like, oh, speeds. It's a very vague question because speed is so many different things. And like you just said right now, when you learned it from me, Tapped, exactly the same experience I had when you started explaining it all to me. I was like, hold on, wait, restart. What was the first one you said? Because yes, there's just so many different categories to it, and it's insane.
It's a lot. And the thing about it is that sometimes for like me, like spectating, like watching people do speed, um, it's not true speed training, right?
Yeah,
So speed training, not to make it sound so simple, but is designed to make you faster, right?
yeah,
And if you're an athlete, then you want that speed to carry over into your sport. So you want to be able to express that speed within your sport, whether that's running the base, running the first base, whether that's running a route, whether that's, doing a quick Euro step to the basket,
yeah,
right? So speed is multi-directional, right? But it has to be expressed, whatever training you're doing, it has to be transferred over to your sport so we can see the expression of speed.
yeah,
And I find that a lot of the speed training that I see is not speed training. I'll give you an example. This has actually happened many, many, many times. But I'll give you an example. I had an athlete come in and they go, oh, this is a newer athlete. He's been with me for just a short period of time. He goes, oh, we do speed training at school. And I was like, awesome. What are you doing? And then once he broke down the speed training that their coach was having them do, I was like, okay. I started asking more questions. I say, okay, so how long is the speed session? How many sets are you guys doing? What's the rest period? Right.
yeah,
And then I told him, I said, that's not speed training.
yeah,
Right. I said, that's conditioning.
yeah,
So running, like I remember when I was in basketball, we used to run suicides all the time. It was like the thing, right? And they would say, okay, we're going to do 1 minute. You gotta hit your suicide in 1 minute, right?
yeah.
Free throw back, half court back. You know what a suicide is.
Yeah.
And we called it speed training. But I remember after the suicides, I didn't feel faster. I actually just felt tired. I felt like throwing up. And I'm
I
like,
want to
all
go
right,
home.
I just wanted to go home. And then I remember our football coach would have us do hill sprints
Yeah,
over and over again. We would do interval sprints. So like one group would sprint up the hill. As soon as one group was done, the other person went, and then the other person went. So there was probably like, I don't know, 5-10 second rest periods in between. And we were doing that, and we were calling it speed training, but it was just conditioning.
mental
So
training and conditioning.
yeah,
Getting
so
strong.
this is my issue with a lot of the speed training in general.
Yeah,
Just because you call something speed training does not mean it's actually speed training.
Yeah,
Make sense?
yeah,
Okay. So let's break it down. So let's start early days. Let's go archaic. 60s is when the track and field became a thing. And back then there was not a lot of structure for speed training. It was just like distance, right? That was kind of like the
yeah,
approach. So let's build aerobic capacity. If you don't get tired, then you can run fast all the time. And that's kind of like if you study up like the training, like Bill Russell, what he was doing in the Celtics, and you look at other teams, it was just like, let's build an aerobic base. Let's
yeah.
make your cardiovascular great. And then you'll be able to just be fast.
It's only technically part of the equation. You got it.
Yeah.
Then
Here's the thing though. Athletes were very athletic back then. You take someone like Jim Brown,
yeah,
freak. OJ Simpson, rest in peace, freak. And you're just like, how are we getting, like, if I look at the programming and what they were doing back then, you're seeing these athletes that were really fast doing what you would call today non-structured training,
yeah.
but yet they were very fast. And then people go, how the heck did they get so fast? And yet they didn't have structured training like today.
Yeah.
And the reason being is you would have to go back further in history. So if I look at an athlete like Jim Brown, all the kids back then played everything. They lived outside. Culture was different. So they had so much movement variability from physical jobs, working on a farm. I remember who's the pitcher? Nolan Ryan worked on the farm, did a lot of farm work, a lot of physical labor, never
Yeah.
did strength training, but he had farm strength and he could throw the ball 100 plus miles an hour.
Well, we talked about it too in previous podcasts. The issue is we get so specified into one individual sport that we're not increasing our movement vocabulary in other sports too, which doesn't that play a factor also back in the day, like you just said?
Yes, that's
moving in all
exactly what
different
it
ways.
is.
Yeah.
Because everybody did everything. Everybody did everything. So by the time they were exposed to any type of training, they already had such a high vocabulary of movement
Yeah.
and everything was fast, right?
Yeah.
They're playing baseball, it's fast. They're
Yeah.
playing basketball, it's fast. They're playing tackle football without pads, fast. So everything was being done fast and everything was multi-directional. So it's almost like they were doing the right thing unknowingly.
Unstructuredly, but almost kind of structured.
Correct. So that was essentially, let's say, 60s, 70s.
Yeah.
And then later 70s, 80s, that's when concepts, track and field started becoming a thing.
Yeah.
And people started looking up to these track and field athletes. And form became a really big thing. Like you have to have proper running form, right? And so then what happens is everybody started shifting towards like this track and field model. Now, keep in mind, track and field is a two-dimensional skill. You're running in a straight line, right? I mean, a little bit of a curve, but generally speaking, you're not having to stop on a dime and do a dig route. You know what I mean?
Change direction.
Yeah, you're not changing directions. You're not, you take the speed of traditional sports where you're having to react. Track and field is a closed skill, right? There's nothing reactive about the speed of a track athlete.
Yeah.
Maybe it's more of a timing. They hear the timing. They're trying to hear the whistle, the go. And then what they would do back then is they would use form was a big thing. And then they would use stopwatches because technology wasn't very evolved. So everything was about stopwatches. So everything's timed.
Yeah.
So that was probably later 70s, early 80s, somewhere around that timeline. I don't know the exact date because it's a lot of information. You can go Google it if you're a nerd. Plyometrics became a thing. So then they started incorporating plyometrics. So then they were like, okay, so we need form, we need track form, and then we need plyometrics because that's explosive. That's going to build some dynamic movements. It's going to make us more explosive.
Yeah.
And to be honest, we still got really, really good results. I mean, you take, Bo Jackson.
Yeah. Freak.
I think he ran like a 4.1, like 7 or something ridiculous.
It's insane.
Right.
It's so unfortunate what happened to him.
Michael Jordan ran a 4.3 track and field.
Yeah.
Randy Moss. Like you're taking these guys that were, pros or even in high school in the 80s and they were still freaks. And my theory is for the same reasons. Their upbringing, they were already exposed. They're already polished up. So when you factor in upbringing, you can't say this is the reason why this is not, you can't say because of my training is why Michael Jordan became Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
Versus, let's say you got a modern day athlete today. Name an NBA player that's in their 20s.
In their 20s, Anthony Edwards.
Anthony Edwards. Okay. Anthony Edwards was born in 2001 or something? 2002?
Yeah, I think I actually might be older than him, which is weird to say now, but yeah.
Okay. So you take an athlete like Anthony Edwards, Minnesota Timberwolves. He has been overly structured, right?
Yeah.
From the time he was young to now, look up his whole history. So he's a byproduct of his training, right?
Yeah.
And you can almost say the same thing for pretty much all the NBA players, or NFL. It doesn't really matter what the sport is, right? If they were born in 2000 or above, most of these guys are a byproduct of their training. But now we have a big issue. Injuries. Nobody, when I say nobody, I mean nobody can figure out what's going on. Like everyone's running around like a chicken without a head. MLB can't figure it out. I think that Major League Baseball specifically, they have paid out in salaries like in the past 10 years. I don't remember the exact number, but I know it's in the billions. They're paying out $1 billion for you to not play. Like, for example, Kevin Durant, when he tore his Achilles, He was getting paid, I think, like $45 million a year. That is the most expensive rehab in the history of rehab.
You also had Klay Thompson when he had his, was it his meniscus or was it ACL?
I think it was both. So I think he had Achilles and then he had ACL like back to back.
Yeah, and he was out for like 2 years getting paid.
But he still collected like 100 million or something ridiculous, right? So athletes today, you can say they're a byproduct of their training.
Yeah.
So that means we're messing up bad, because talking about the origins and the evolution of speed, one thing that you never heard of ever, I would say 90s and before. And if you're my age, I'm 37. We never saw this on ESPN when we were a kid. Non-contact injuries. If I was a child, if I'm 15 years old, I'm going way back, and you're running, and then you get an injury and no one touched you, we're all laughing. We're cracking up. We're like, and you're probably gonna get laughed at and called fragile and a lot of not friendly things, because that's the generation I grew up in. Like if someone gets hurt, we laugh. Yeah. That's the generation we grew up in, right?
Yeah.
You get laid out on a tackle, we're cracking up. And we're giving someone's getting props, and someone else is like, man, dude, you're on his poster. Right? Non-contact injuries did not become a thing until I would say mid 2000s. And then it blew up from like 2010 to 2015. It blew up. And then in 2025, crazy to even say we're in 2025, the number has not gone down. It continues to rise every year. I saw this funny thing that the NFL had put out, because I follow a lot of podcasts and articles on injuries for the NFL. And they had said that ACL injuries went down like 1%, 2%, and they're like celebrating it. But the funny part about it is from like 2010 or 2015 to 2025, it had gone up like 80%. So I'm like, okay, are we calling 1% a victory
when we're up 80%? Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay. I think I was following the San Francisco 49ers, and it was like all of their all pros and all their all-star like running backs, Brandon Ayuk and all those guys are out. Kittle, hamstring injuries, soft tissue tears, strains, Achilles tightness. Who's the dude who just had Achilles tightness recently? Oh, Luka. Is it Luka Doncic?
Ooh, no, I didn't hear about it though.
I think, but it's just like, you can't turn on ESPN for 5 minutes and be like,
everyone's getting injured. Everyone's sitting on the bench. We have a lot more players starting to do, which is why the league's starting to have issues. Guys are playing, not playing, not even injured, sitting on the bench because they don't want to get.
You got it. Okay. So this brings me up to the 90s. So we've talked about 60s, 70s, no structure, just aerobic conditioning, 80s, track and field introduction, plyometric introduction. And then in the late 80s, early 90s, there is a famous strength coach. He's probably one of the most, if you're a strength coach, you know who this is, Charles Poliquin. And he was a Canadian strength coach. He's viewed highly in the strength community. He just passed away a few years ago. But he was a consultant for a lot of like MLB teams, NFL teams, strength academies. And he was like known for getting people strong. Like if you want to get strong, and you want to be explosive, he's trained like power lifters. He's created programs for not power lifters, a lot of NFL guys.
Yeah.
But in the 90s, he came into the space, and at this time, you got to also understand that science is also evolving, right?
Yeah.
So when he came into the space, he goes, "You just got to get stronger." He wrote an article. You can go look this up. One of his early articles. He was talking about like, you don't even have to sprint to be fast. Literally said, you don't have to sprint to be fast. You just got to be stronger. If you're stronger and you put more force into the ground, you're going to be faster. So that became a thing. And some people took that as Bible. And you can see that because the strength programs in the like 90s and 2000s started becoming a big thing. Like most sports, MLB, NFL, like they were just doing a lot of like random training. A lot of the strength training back then was bodybuilding-ish. So like you can even watch, if you watch the Last Dance with Michael Jordan, And we know the story how he got beat up by the Pistons, and then he called Tim Grover and said, "Hey, I gotta get stronger."
Yeah.
And you see him doing a lot of bodybuilding movements.
Yeah.
Right. He's doing lateral raises and lat pull downs. I'm not against that, just for the record. But he was doing this bodybuilding program, and then we know Michael Jordan won 6 championships.
Yeah.
Once again, how old was he? 27. So it's not like he had 27 years of movement. Once again,
Yeah.
built, that was a solid foundation, and then he added strength to it. So I'm not going to say like, talk bad on like the program, because Michael Jordan is my favorite athlete of all time. But he was doing a bodybuilding program, and then this guy, Charles Poliquin, comes in and goes, "Hey, you guys, we got to get explosive," right? And you got to understand the blueprint for strength training back then. It was all based off of strength athletes. Yeah. So Olympic lifters, strongmen, and then power lifters.
Yeah.
So that's where the introduction of the big 3 came to be. Yeah. Squat, bench, deadlift. If you can squat, you can bench, and you can deadlift, you're going to be fast, right? And it became such a staple that the NFL Combine made it a staple. So at the Combine, what do? They test your bench press. You can't walk into a weight room in high school and then not have like the top 3 squatters in the school on the board, right?
Yeah.
Power clean. Let's if the power clean goes up, because power is speed times strength, so you got to move that bar very quickly. So a power clean does build power, but power clean gets you good at power clean.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you can do a double leg takedown. It doesn't mean all of a sudden you can, jump in the air and put the ball under your leg and then dunk it. Or start throwing 100 miles an hour, right?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Nolan Ryan wasn't doing power cleans to throw 100 miles an hour at 40 years old.
Well, I feel like you've already said a good story in the past on a podcast of the examples of what strength training in the weight room does to an athlete with your picture that you had that you were working with.
Correct.
Yeah.
But this goes right hand in hand with speed, right? So the idea, and you also got to understand technology started becoming more advanced. So in the 90s, they started using a lot of slow motion. They started using a lot of film, right?
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden film is a thing. And now we have structured strength training programs.
Yeah.
But now they're doing less speed training, because we're still going to do speed training, but like, as long as you're squatting a lot and you can put more force into the ground, you're good. I think it was, I can't remember the university. I want to say UC Berkeley. I may be wrong, but I know it was one of the major universities. They would have like, they had one of those like $100,000 scales that it can measure your force, right? Your rate of force.
Yeah.
And that became a thing.
Stuff's crazy.
How much force can you put into the ground? Stride frequency, stride length, and all those are the things that matter to them. They're like, keep getting stronger, you get faster.
Yeah.
Then let's move on to the 2000s. Then in the 2000, from like 2000 to 2010, if you actually, let me backtrack a little bit. So if you take the athletes during that gap, so like you take the 80s and 90s, and you had a lot of freak athletes, right?
Yeah.
There was a small phase where a lot of people would argue, if you're a diehard sports fan and you follow sports, there's a range, I would say, from like 95 to 2005. Who are the best athletes? Michael Jordan was already about to retire, but who are the greatest athletes on the planet from 95 to 2005? How many freak athletes do we have? The number got a lot smaller.
I think so. I was born in 2000s.
Oh, okay. So watch this. So you had a couple freaks like Randy Moss, but I'm talking about as a whole. So if you watch like the league as a whole,
yeah,
I don't want to say it regressed, but I also want to say it didn't necessarily progress. It was almost like we were plateaued for a little bit. So from like 95 to 2005, we're a little plateaued, and then all of a sudden, that's when the approach of 3-dimensional speed became a thing. So then later 2000s to 2015, it was like multi-directional speed. So then they started programming speed in every direction. They would have lateral speed, linear speed, retreating acceleration, change of direction, stop and go. But then a lot of the training and the drills for it, the way they would do it, they would just do it by volume, right? So that's where you'll see people like, hey, you got to do your ladder drills, you know?
Yeah.
It was just like a lot of random stuff. So now the speed training became more structured, but we didn't really understand intent. We just knew that, okay, we need to train all these attributes. We need to get a neurological response to these things, and then we'll be good. The results were from 2000, let's say 5 to 2015, we got explosive athletes, like explosive.
Yeah.
So as they made this change, the athletes started getting super fast, super strong. We could probably both argue, and most people would argue that athletes today are probably the most explosive they've ever been.
Yeah.
I mean, look at you're having linebackers that they're 250 and they could run a 4.4. Like,
oh, yeah, most explosive guys, but now we're also dealing with the most injured guys.
I was just gonna say that.
Yeah.
But now there's the problem of the injuries, right? So where it got tricky is the sports performance community went into, they like crossed over into the PT community.
Yeah.
And they started looking at orthopedics, orthos and chiropractors and all these recovery methodologies. And all of a sudden, you're having PTs that are like, they know nothing about performance. They know about how to rehab somebody. And now they're saying things like, there's this famous PT, her name's Sue Falsone. If you're in my space, you know exactly who she is. She's awesome. She's very intelligent, but I don't obviously fully agree with everything she says, but she made a statement that only PTs can prescribe exercise. Unless you're a physical therapist, you're not allowed to prescribe exercise. Pretty much trainers, strength coaches were not allowed to prescribe exercise at all. And it became this thing when the PT world got involved, then it was avoidance of everything. So let's say, for example, if you're a basketball player and you're like, Henry, I need to jump higher. I need to be faster. I need to be able to jump higher.
Yeah.
So the thought process in the early 2010s was, well, because you jump a lot and you're sprinting a lot in your sport already, we can't be doing more of that, right? Baseball players, because you do a lot of overhead throwing in your sport, in the training, we can do everything but overhead throwing. So it was an avoidance.
Yeah.
It was an avoidance of positions, and it was an avoidance of techniques. Oh, wait, when you're running a go route, you're exploding. So we got to be real careful on your training. We don't want an overuse injury.
They're just trying to make it stronger.
Okay. So it became avoidance of position, avoidance of things like, the neck. I remember that was a big deal. Like, the neck. The neck's so complicated. Don't mess with it. Don't get it strong. We don't want to injure somebody. So it's almost like the PTs and the chiros at the pro level, and obviously everything trickles down, right? They put this fear into people like, let's avoid this, let's avoid that. And everyone's like scared to do anything. So they created this mindset of like, we're fragile.
Yeah.
If we do any little thing, we're going to pull a hamstring. If we do any little thing wrong, any little form. And so everything became a little chaotic because you have the PTs are getting involved in the training now. And then you're also having this old school mentality because you're having coaches now that are, let's say, in their 40s, 50s, right? And they were taught things from the 80s, the 90s.
Yeah.
You guys can see where I'm going with this. Just a lot of pure chaos. So you're having this performance coach says, well, this is what I did to get fast that I learned a million years ago.
Yeah.
And now you're having the PTs and the chiros and that community is like, oh, wait.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was, let's say 2010 to 2015. So you're having a lot of chaos.
I wouldn't even say the PTs were completely wrong, right? Because the sport does damage the body, but their intent of how to go about it was probably not what we could argue the best method, right? You don't avoid it. We need to make it stronger. Otherwise, we're just not it's going to keep having the same issue.
Yeah. I just think the methods were maybe a little too aggressive, right?
They had the understanding that the sport was damaging. They just didn't realize sport's damaging. It's just a matter of how much can we tug away at the damage. Yeah.
Okay. So now let's go 2015. So everybody's in shambles. The NFL's in shambles. MLB's in shambles. Nobody can figure it out. Like, what's going on? They're bringing in PhDs after, I mean, guys are having, 20 PhDs, bringing in an entire staff.
Yeah.
And then the next year they all get injured. And then at the pro level, they're very extreme. They're like, fire everybody, get rid of everybody. Our athletes, he lost a little bit of his speed. He's getting injured. Let's just start over. So they bring in the next staff. And because money is the driver for pro sports, right? It's almost like the timelines weren't even real. So it became like this badge of honor that, oh, you had an ACL get torn. How quickly can you come back?
Yeah.
So that's a whole nother story for another day. But from 2015 to probably today, now I would say this is the birth of the unconventional community. And what I mean by this is your traditional community is like you have your credentials, right? You have your strength and conditioning coaches, you have your kinesiology majors, you have your DPTs, your chiropractors, you have your ex-athletes, right? We'll call that your quote unquote traditional speed training. That's your traditional team, right? But now I would say 2015, somewhere around there, the unconventional community became a thing. These are the people that would say, like, you don't need to have a PhD in order to train somebody, right? And I agree with that to an extent. I don't have a PhD. And so but they started saying things like, they started like bashing the quote unquote traditional community, because what they did is they would take all the statistics, like injuries have gone up 400%. This is happening. ACL injuries, hip flexor strains, and they would take all these statistics and they would be like, well, this is how you got to do things.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. So let's say, for example, you can call the unconventional community as like, you can almost put them in the category of like the movement community. So I remember Conor McGregor, for example, he had what's called a movement coach. It was Idle Portal. If you look up movement coach 2010 and beyond, that did not exist. You're like, what? You had a what coach? And he was doing things that would challenge, like balance, fluidity, flow, movement, and these things became a thing. So then you have all these movement coaches and you have all these movement programs. And to be honest, I'm kind of a fan of it. The problem that it created was the conventional community is like, look, I went to school for 37 years, to get these 17 PhDs. And you're telling me that if I just like catch this ball and juggle around and move and balance on this beam, like it's just going to fix all my problems.
So we talked about strength, and we said athletes got explosive. We've talked in previous podcasts. If we look at the old and we look at the new, even though we can say we're a little bit more explosive in a certain sense and it's more consistent, we seem a bit more stiff. And now you're telling me he's got a movement coach. So it's almost like as if we created this issue and now we have to create another thing to fix the issue because naturally we're not doing it.
So let's dig a little deeper.
Yeah.
All the movement guys had phenomenal success. They had a lot of success.
Yeah.
And, I've talked about like one of the theories, like for example, spinal engine. That's one of them, about the idea that the spine is dynamic and it needs to be able to move and change positions. The spine doesn't have to be erect 24/7. The track world is not like that because they're like arm and leg, you want the cyclical action, right?
Well, I feel like if our bodies weren't meant to go there, our body wouldn't let us go there then. And so.
Okay. So these movement guys would say, look at how people move in sport. I won't name all the programs because I'm not against or for. I think one thing I did do during that time is I listened. I took a lot of these courses. So at the time I had only taken a lot of traditional courses, right? So all my schooling was traditional. But then I was like, why not? Let me hear what they have to say. Why do these guys hate each other? And I started learning a lot of different things. And then obviously I'm all about results, right? So
Yeah.
if my athletes are getting results and they're not able to hurt, they're not getting injured, I'm all about it. So I've talked about previous episodes. I always guinea pig myself. In my 20s, I've talked about, I don't have to go through that story again, but I stopped sprinting in my 20s because it just hurt.
Yeah.
Well, I'm 37 and I do full speed, max effort sprints, and my body feels fine. I think I wish I would have timed myself in my 20s and timed myself now, but I feel better. I'm faster. I'm more explosive, more
It's
dynamic.
crazy.
Okay. So these unconventional methods, they're onto something, right?
Yeah.
And most in the beginning, when something's new, if it goes against your bias, people are going to be very much so against it.
Yeah.
But when you start getting good results, and now what happened is the traditional side, right? Athletes stopped trusting them. And that's still a thing today. So nowadays you'll see guys like Kawhi Leonard and really in any sport, not just in pro sports, college and high school, parents do not trust their medical
Staff at the college or the professional level.
or even their own medical, like whatever type of insurance you have. They don't trust that process. So people are doing out of pocket. People are trying to figure things out because they're like, okay, we've been seeing you. We've been doing what you told us. Our son has, his left knee and his hamstring is still tight and he still can't run fast. So people, I feel like common sense has started to kick in for the non-trainer community. So the actual clients, the athletes, the parents, and a lot of trust has been lost because they're not getting the results that they want. And the results that they are getting are devastating because athletes are getting injured.
So what would you say you hope goes forward? Because we've showcased in the past that when something we change over, we have this, for some reason, issue of not still keeping the goods of the last and progressing and learning something new. So you said now we have this distrust within the traditional way, but we can probably even argue there's still some great qualities within the traditional way.
I'm all for it.
Yeah.
Because this is the issue that the traditional world, the unconventional methods have, is they will bash the fact that you're like, oh, you don't have a PhD, you don't have all these credentials, right?
Yeah.
But these unconventional methods, they don't understand why what they're doing works. They know it works, which is great. If something works, we can figure out why it works later. And I'm all for it. So if you had me to choose one, I'm going to choose results over understanding. So if I told you, hey, if you do 17 jumping jacks every single day, you're going to be really fast and you have to wear blue shoes while you're doing it. And all of a sudden you're running really, really fast. You probably don't give a shit why it works. You're just like, dude, I'm running fast. I'm jumping high.
Yeah.
Right.
Not getting injured. And let's keep
that's
doing
kind of
stuff.
like the lens that the unconventional community views things from. They're like, look, do it this way, move this way. You'll be fast. You'll look good, doing it. You won't get injured. But because they don't fully understand like the anatomy, the physiology, how it's actually changing the body structurally, they can plateau. So if you get, I'm going to talk good and bad about both. I'm just pros and cons. I don't know. I don't like the word good and bad. Most of their results that they got, these guys, they got it because they started using these methods on advanced athletes. So if I'm using this new method, I have this athlete who's bitter towards the training staff. Let's say, for example, I get a Kawhi Leonard and he's bitter. He goes, man, you guys have been working, helping me. Thank you for helping me, but it's not helping. And all of a sudden, the minds start to get opened up. And to be honest, even for me, I experienced that. All the pro athletes I've ever worked with, I never started with. They came to me because they were bitter with the philosophy and the training practices they had been doing. And they're like, my body's hurt, my elbow's hurting, my knees are hurting, I'm not getting faster. So it's almost like I was able to gain them as athletes and clients out of their frustrations.
Yeah.
But the downside of the unconventional community is you're getting a phenomenal baseline. So even for me, it's not fair, right?
Yeah.
I've talked about how I guinea pig myself and I guinea pig my 50 plus clients. I don't use a method that I can't use on everybody, right? Conceptually. Then now what's happening with the traditional community, they're like, something starts to work. Okay, let's go study it. Let's go figure out. And now they're slowly coming around. And it seems like it kind of feels like you have one extreme over here, you have another extreme over there, and then you have the people in the middle that are like, we kind of need both.
Yeah.
And I feel I would put myself somewhere in the middle because I do unconventional things, but I also do conventional things. So like unconventional, they'll be like, just focus on movement, fix the system, not the symptoms. They'll say things like that, right? Well, you can't ignore that there's a problem there. So we got to do both. How about I just give the person a better hip while simultaneously teach them how to move better and being faster?
Yeah.
So that's kind of, man, I can keep talking about this, but in a nutshell, we went from we know nothing about it to we started copying other blueprints like track and field to some guy comes in and says, hey, we need to just get stronger. That's still a thing to this day. So if, you go to any strength coach or a trainer and you go, hey, I got to get strong. I got to get faster. The first thing you're going to be like, we just got to get stronger. We got to make your squat go up. If your legs will get bigger and more powerful, you'll be able to run faster.
Yeah.
The difference though is that what people don't understand is that when you're getting really good at the weight room, strength is a vector, right? It's direction specific. The angles utilized in sport are not the same angles utilized in strength training. So we have to, yes, get stronger. So what I've done, I'll give you an example of my philosophy. I do multi-directional speed. I do believe in getting strong, but this time I'm biasing angles that are transverse driven. We've talked about the transverse plane, being able to go forward and back, left and right, how it's a little bit of a hybrid. So now it's like, how do I get them to move through a transverse plane? Oh, wait, their spine has to be able to move, right? Oh, they have to be fast in real time, right? That would be vision. That would be ears. That's where reaction time comes from. So now my coaching is I coach from top to bottom and I coach from the inside out. So do I believe that getting stronger gets you faster? Absolutely. Not to the extreme that other people view it.
Done it back in the day, yeah.
Do I believe you should only be conventional? Absolutely not.
You gotta have a bit of both.
Yeah, you got to have fluidity. You got to have a flow state, right?
Gotta be strong, but you also gotta be movable.
Yeah. So one thing that I like to do as a coach, as a trainer, is I love being in the middle. I'll let these guys fight. I don't like to fight with either one because what catches them off guard. I remember I was having this dialogue and we'll kind of close it up on this. I was talking to somebody about speed. This is a few months back. And I was explaining how the spine works and why I like the spine to be dynamic. And they were like all against it, right? And then I started breaking down, he started explaining his method of speed training.
Yeah.
And then I broke it down. I knew more about his own method. And he goes, oh, I didn't know you knew about this. So he was going, so I asked him, I said, well, where did you learn that? What made you come to those conclusions? He goes, oh, it's just what I was taught. So it's not, he didn't have like, oh, I started here, then I did that. It was just like, this is what I did. This is what I was taught. So this is what I'm showing everybody else. And he was blown away that I actually knew a lot, probably more about his own method than he even knew about his own method. And he goes, you used to train? I was like, yeah, I used to train people like that. He goes, oh, wow. I said, this is why I've shifted my perspective. I still like this. I think this is good. Being strong is awesome. So I wasn't completely against him. Yeah. I had to kind of like break it down. Vice versa. I've had the same conversations with unconventional people that are like, just be in a flow state, just flow. You don't need structure. You don't need PhDs. You don't need all this, right? And I talk to those guys and it's just like, wait, you still need to understand like how the human hip works. You still need to understand like, so they think I'm against them. So depending on what the topic is, both sides will be like, Henry doesn't like us. Or maybe he loves, oh, he's one of us.
Yeah.
So it's so funny because that's what I mean by I like to be in the middle, because I believe both sides are correct because they're both getting results, but you got to take it as a grain of salt. Yeah. You really do. Yeah. And you got to, at the end of the day, you have to explore on your own, which is what I'm doing all the time.
Yeah.
And then now I'm at a point where like I'm still evolving every year, but I'm not making drastic changes anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Family, life, other things going on.
Yeah. Well, not just that, to my philosophies, because I'm getting really, really good results.
Yeah.
So for me to make major changes to my training philosophy, I'm still obviously
Changes.
growing.
Yeah.
But major where I'm like, oh, I used to do that, now I do this. I'm getting really, really good results.
It'd have to be something pretty big of a
Maybe in my lifetime, maybe after I don't know.
yeah.
I remember one. I remember a friend of mine we were talking about our quote unquote mentors that are now in their 60s and 70s, and he said it's almost like we have to wait for all these guys to die off for these new methods to like be birthed. And it's a fun topic, the evolution of speed. I love it. I can talk about it, as you can tell, for a very, very long time. But there's still a lot of chaos in there. What I love about it is that now everyone has an open mind. People are exploring different ideas.
Yeah.
The quote unquote unconventional community, they're like, okay, we need to know the science a little bit more. And then the science community, they're like, okay, we need to understand performance demands a little bit better. So I do feel we are getting better, and you can see it in sports. Athletes are faster. They are stronger. Trying to solve that problem of injuries. That's probably where we're at right now.
Yeah.
We're at a crossroads, like what's causing the injuries. Whole nother topic for a whole nother day.
Can't wait to do that one.
But,
That's a fun one. I can't wait to see where this goes in the next like 5 years. That whole middle community of just the grab and go and take it from both sides. Because again, they both have phenomenal ideas. And if you just mix them together, like if you could take the traditional strength training and mix it with a bit more movement, like we talked in previous podcasts, the 3-dimensional, you're still building the strength, and but now it's pertained in the intent now actually goes into the sport specific.
Correct.
And I just can't wait to see how that just grows. And I really hope it just takes off the way it looks like.
The evolution of speed 2035.
Yeah.
We're going to be like, we were wrong.
Yeah.
Delete everything we said. We were completely wrong. Now we know how to levitate.
Yeah.
We've learned how to defy gravity.
It was a good step, but now we're just at a whole different level.
We're just using our mind to get fast.
Yeah.
Like, right. No, I love it. And to kind of close up with this, if you're a parent and you want your athlete to get fast, number one, the most important thing is you've got to train speed. Speed is a neurological thing where the effort level is going to be anywhere from 80 to 100. So if you want to get fast and you're not training those neurological efforts, you're not going to get faster. So what we're going to do is we'll probably end up doing an evolution of speed part 2. Today was more about like the history of it. Maybe we'll go more over strategy. We'll go over techniques. It's just such
evolution of speed, but more like the strategies of speed. Yeah.
Because there's different ways. We'll do that. I don't know. We'll do that soon. Maybe we'll do it next time. Yeah. It's just such a deep topic. Like I feel like we've not even began to peel the onion. Like it's just
you start doing month by month. Just 1 month of pure strength topic, 1 month of pure speed.
It's such a
really dive
such
into
a deep
it.
topic. It's such a deep topic. And it's a topic that I am fascinated with. So any other questions? Got anything else?
No, again, I'm just excited to see where this goes. Personally, firsthand, I've gotten to see, even without as much as Henry knows today, what he did back then was already phenomenal. And the fact that there's so much more information and the way it's going is just crazy. And I can't wait to see these athletes just evolve into these freaking dominant dudes and not have to go through the things I had to go through during that transition of the strength and all and getting, labor issues and tears in high school. So, yeah, it's going to help out athletes so much going forward. Like I really do believe that.
We're just trying to figure this out one day at a time.
Yeah,
right?
one day at a time.
Thank you guys. We'll see you guys next time.
Peace.